Question 1. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the documentation of an incident involving a Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder. The report filed by the permit holder's employer lacks specific details required by Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 40, Chapter 5, Part 1, regarding the circumstances of the incident. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this compliance gap? Option A. Dismiss the audit finding as a minor administrative oversight, as the core details of the incident were recorded. Option B. File a general incident report with the local law enforcement agency, assuming this will satisfy any reporting obligations related to the concealed handgun permit. Option C. Immediately initiate a detailed review of the incident report, cross-referencing all collected information against the specific reporting requirements outlined in Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 40, Chapter 5, Part 1, and take corrective action to supplement any missing or inaccurate information as mandated by law. Option D. Advise the permit holder that the report appears to be incomplete and suggest they review general best practices for incident reporting to ensure future compliance. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a detailed review of the incident report, cross-referencing all collected information against the specific reporting requirements outlined in Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 40, Chapter 5, Part 1, and take corrective action to supplement any missing or inaccurate information as mandated by law. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to Louisiana's concealed handgun permit regulations, specifically concerning the proper handling and reporting of incidents involving a permit holder. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and accurate assessment of a situation that could have legal ramifications for both the permit holder and potentially the entity involved in the audit. The auditor's findings necessitate a swift and informed response to ensure compliance and mitigate any potential penalties. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the incident report against the specific requirements outlined in Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 40, Chapter 5, Part 1, which governs concealed handgun permits. This includes verifying that all mandated information was collected and reported accurately and promptly to the relevant authorities, as stipulated by law. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the audit findings by ensuring that the incident was handled in accordance with Louisiana's legal framework for concealed handgun permits, thereby demonstrating due diligence and compliance. It prioritizes adherence to the statutory requirements for reporting and documentation. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without a proper investigation, assuming the incident was minor or inconsequential. This fails to acknowledge the legal obligations associated with concealed handgun permits in Louisiana and could lead to further regulatory scrutiny or penalties for non-compliance. Another incorrect approach would be to only partially review the incident report, focusing on superficial details without cross-referencing them against the specific legal requirements for reporting such incidents under Louisiana law. This superficial review risks overlooking critical omissions or inaccuracies that could render the report non-compliant. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to rely on general best practices for incident reporting without consulting the specific statutes governing concealed handgun permits in Louisiana. While general best practices are valuable, they do not substitute for strict adherence to the legally mandated procedures. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific regulatory landscape of Louisiana concerning concealed handgun permits. This involves consulting the relevant statutes and administrative rules. Then they should meticulously compare the incident report against these legal requirements, identifying any discrepancies or omissions. If deficiencies are found, the professional must take immediate corrective action, which may include amending the report, re-reporting the incident, or providing additional documentation as required by law. This systematic, legally grounded approach ensures that all obligations are met and potential risks are mitigated. Question 2. The audit findings indicate that a Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder, while temporarily away from their vehicle, stored their handgun in a manner that may not fully comply with state regulations. Considering the potential risks and legal ramifications, which of the following storage methods best upholds the principles of responsible firearm ownership in Louisiana law? Option A. Placing the handgun in an unlocked glove compartment. Option B. Securing the handgun in a locked container that is inaccessible to unauthorized individuals. Option C. storing the handgun in a zipped bag on the floor of the vehicle. Option D, leaving the handgun in plain view on the passenger seat of the vehicle. The correct answer is B, securing the handgun in a locked container that is inaccessible to unauthorized individuals. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to Louisiana's concealed handgun permit regulations, specifically concerning the proper storage of a firearm when not in immediate possession. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance personal convenience with strict legal obligations designed to prevent accidental discharge, theft, or unauthorized access to a firearm. Misinterpreting or neglecting these regulations can lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges, and can compromise public safety. The correct approach involves securing the handgun in a locked container that is inaccessible to unauthorized individuals. This aligns directly with Louisiana Revised Statute 1495, which addresses the unlawful possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and by extension, implies the need for secure storage to prevent unauthorized access by any individual, especially when the permit holder is not in immediate control of the weapon. A locked container, such as a gun safe, a locked glove compartment, or a lock case, effectively prevents unauthorized access and minimizes the risk of the firearm being used in a crime or by a minor. This method prioritizes safety and legal compliance above all else. An incorrect approach involves leaving the handgun in plain view on the passenger seat of the vehicle. This directly violates the spirit and likely the letter of Louisiana law regarding responsible firearm handling and storage. It creates an immediate risk of theft, as the firearm is easily visible and accessible to anyone who might approach the vehicle. Furthermore, it increases the likelihood of accidental discharge if the weapon is jostled or tampered with. This approach demonstrates a severe disregard for public safety and legal requirements. Another incorrect approach involves placing the handgun in an unlocked glove compartment. While it might be out of immediate sight, an unlocked glove compartment offers no real security. It can be easily opened by a child or a thief, rendering the storage ineffective and still posing a significant risk. This method fails to meet the standard of secure storage required by law and ethical firearm practices. A further incorrect approach involves placing the handgun in a bag on the floor of the vehicle, even if the bag is zipped. A zipped bag does not constitute a locked container and can be easily opened. This offers minimal protection against unauthorized access and does not meet the legal standard for secure firearm storage in Louisiana. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and strict adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. When in doubt about storage requirements, consulting the Louisiana State Police or legal counsel is advisable. The primary consideration should always be public safety and legal compliance, not personal convenience. Question 3. The audit findings indicate a concealed handgun permit holder in Louisiana stored their firearm in their vehicle while attending a social gathering. The permit holder claims the firearm was in the glove compartment, but the glove compartment was not locked. What is the most appropriate action to ensure compliance with Louisiana's concealed handgun permit regulations and responsible firearm practices? Option A. Assume that since the permit holder has a concealed handgun permit, any storage method within their vehicle is acceptable. Option B. Place the handgun on the floor of the passenger seat covered by a jacket to prevent it from being seen. Option C. Leave the handgun in the unlocked glove compartment as it is out of sight and the vehicle is locked. Option D. Secure the handgun in a locked container within the vehicle, separate from the glove compartment, ensuring it is inaccessible to unauthorized individuals. Correct answer is D. Secure the handgun in a locked container within the vehicle, separate from the glove compartment, ensuring it is inaccessible to unauthorized individuals. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to Louisiana's concealed handgun permit regulations, specifically concerning the proper storage of a firearm when not in immediate possession. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance personal convenience with strict legal obligations designed to prevent accidental discharge, unauthorized access, and theft. Failure to comply can result in severe legal penalties and compromise public safety. The correct approach involves securing the handgun in a locked container that is inaccessible to unauthorized individuals. This aligns directly with Louisiana Revised Statute 1495 95. 2. Which addresses the unlawful possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and by extension, implies a duty of care in preventing unauthorized access to firearms. Furthermore, the general principles of responsible gun ownership, often emphasized in concealed handgun permit training, mandate secure storage to prevent harm. This approach prioritizes safety and legal compliance by ensuring the firearm is not readily available to children or individuals who are not legally permitted to possess it. An incorrect approach would be to leave the handgun in plain view on a car seat, even if the vehicle is locked. This fails to meet the standard of secure storage and creates a significant risk of theft or unauthorized access, potentially violating the spirit, if not the letter, of laws designed to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. Another incorrect approach is to place the handgun in the glove compartment without locking it. While it might be out of sight, it is not secured against unauthorized access, especially if the glove compartment is easily opened or if the vehicle is broken into. This also fails to meet the requirement of a locked container. Finally, carrying the handgun concealed on one's person while inside a private residence where children are present, without it being secured, is also problematic. While concealed carry permits allow for carrying in certain locations, the responsibility for safe storage when not actively carrying or when children are present remains paramount and is often a component of responsible gun ownership training. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific legal requirements for firearm storage in Louisiana. This involves consulting the relevant statutes and any guidelines provided by the Louisiana State Police or the issuing authority for concealed handgun permits. When in doubt, erring on the side of greater security is always the prudent choice. A mental checklist should include: is the firearm unloaded? Is it in a locked container? Is that container inaccessible to unauthorized individuals, particularly children? Adhering to these principles ensures both legal compliance and responsible gun ownership. Question 4. The audit findings indicate a recent traffic stop in Louisiana where a concealed handgun permit holder was found to have their firearm stored in the glove compartment of their vehicle, which was locked at the time. Considering Louisiana's concealed handgun permit laws, what is the most legally compliant method of firearm storage in this scenario? Option A. The firearm must be secured in a locked container, such as a locked glove compartment, or carried on the person. Option B. The firearm can be left anywhere within the locked vehicle as the permit holder is legally allowed to carry a concealed handgun. Option C. The firearm can be stored in an unlocked console or under a seat within the vehicle. Option D. The firearm can be left unsecured in the glove compartment as long as the vehicle is locked. The correct answer is A. The firearm must be secured in a locked container, such as a locked glove compartment, or carried on the person. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to Louisiana's concealed handgun permit regulations, specifically concerning the proper storage of a firearm when not in immediate possession. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the permit holder to balance personal convenience with strict legal obligations designed to prevent unauthorized access and potential misuse of a firearm. Failure to comply can have serious legal consequences and compromise public safety. The correct approach involves understanding and applying Louisiana Revised Statute 1494(1), which outlines the requirements for safe storage of firearms. This statute mandates that a handgun must be secured in a locked container or a locked firearm rack, or be carried on the person, when it is not under the direct control of the permit holder. Therefore, the most appropriate action is to ensure the firearm is either on the permit holder's person or secured in a locked container, such as a vehicle's glove compartment that is locked, or a dedicated locked gun case. This directly addresses the legal requirement to prevent unauthorized access by individuals who are not legally permitted to possess the firearm, such as minors or prohibited persons. An incorrect approach would be to leave the handgun unsecured in the passenger compartment of the vehicle, even if the vehicle is locked. This violates Louisiana Revised Statute 1494(1) by not ensuring the firearm is in a locked container or on the person. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because the permit holder is legally allowed to carry a concealed handgun, the firearm can be left anywhere within the vehicle as long as the vehicle is locked. This misunderstands the specific storage requirements outlined in the statute. Finally, another incorrect approach would be to store the handgun in a location that is not secured, such as under a seat or in an unlocked console, as this also fails to meet the legal standard for safe storage and prevents unauthorized access. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and strict adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. This involves proactively familiarizing oneself with the specifics of Louisiana's concealed handgun laws, particularly regarding storage requirements, and applying this knowledge to everyday situations. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and ensure the firearm is stored in a manner that unequivocally meets or exceeds legal requirements. Question 5. Compliance review shows a Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder is aware of the general prohibitions against carrying a handgun in certain public places. While attending a community event held in a public park adjacent to a public elementary school, the permit holder carries their handgun in their vehicle parked in the school's parking lot. The event is taking place outside the school buildings, and the permit holder has no intention of entering the school. Which of the following actions demonstrates the most compliant understanding of Louisiana's concealed handgun laws? Option A. Recognizing that carrying a handgun in the school's parking lot, even if adjacent to the school and not entering a building, is a violation of Louisiana Revised Statute 40-1379. 3. Option B. Believing that carrying a handgun in the school's parking lot is acceptable because the community event is in an adjacent park and the permit holder has no malicious intent. Option C. Relying on informal advice from another permit holder that school parking lots are generally acceptable for carrying a handgun if the permit holder remains in their vehicle. Option D. Assuming that carrying a handgun in a vehicle parked in a school's parking lot is permissible as long as the permit holder does not enter any school buildings and the school is not in session. The correct answer is A. Recognizing that carrying a handgun in the school's parking lot, even if adjacent to the school and not entering a building, is a violation of Louisiana Revised Statute 40-1379. 3. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the nuances of Louisiana's concealed handgun permit laws, specifically concerning the permissible locations for carrying a handgun. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying the statutory exceptions to the general prohibition against carrying a handgun in certain public places, particularly when those locations are associated with educational institutions. Misinterpreting these exceptions can lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between prohibited areas and those where carrying may be permitted under specific circumstances. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough understanding of Louisiana Revised Statute 40-1379. 3. Which outlines the locations where a concealed handgun permit holder is prohibited from carrying a handgun. This statute explicitly lists public schools, elementary or secondary schools, and school property. Therefore, the correct approach is to recognize that carrying a handgun on the grounds of a public elementary school, even if not inside a building, is a violation of the law. This approach prioritizes adherence to the clear statutory language and avoids any ambiguity or assumption about exceptions that are not explicitly provided for in the law. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that because the individual is in a parking lot adjacent to the school and not inside a building, the prohibition does not apply. This fails to recognize that Louisiana law often defines school property broadly to include the entire campus, including parking lots and adjacent grounds. This approach demonstrates a lack of precise understanding of the statutory definition of prohibited areas. Another incorrect approach is to rely on personal interpretation or hearsay regarding exceptions to the law. For instance, believing that carrying is permissible if the school is not in session or if the individual is not interacting with students. Louisiana law does not provide such discretionary exceptions. The prohibition is tied to the location itself, regardless of the time or specific activity. This approach risks making assumptions that are not supported by the statute. A third incorrect approach is to focus on the permit holder's intent or perceived lack of threat. While intent might be a factor in some legal contexts, Louisiana's concealed carry laws regarding prohibited locations are generally strict liability offenses. The mere presence of a handgun in a prohibited area, regardless of the permit holder's intentions or perceived harmlessness, can constitute a violation. This approach overlooks the objective nature of the prohibition. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes strict adherence to the letter of the law. When faced with uncertainty about a specific location's permissibility, the safest and most legally sound approach is to err on the side of caution and avoid carrying the handgun in that location. This involves consulting the relevant statutes directly, seeking clarification from legal counsel or law enforcement if necessary, and understanding that personal interpretations or assumptions are not a substitute for legal compliance. The principle of ignorance of the law is no excuse is paramount. Question 6. The audit findings indicate a recent incident where a Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder stored their firearm in an unlocked vehicle glove compartment while attending a public event. Which of the following actions best demonstrates compliance with Louisiana's regulations for firearm storage when not under the permit holder's direct control? Option A. Storing the firearm in a locked container within the vehicle, with ammunition stored separately. Option B. Leaving the firearm in an unlocked glove compartment, ensuring it is not visible from outside the vehicle. Option C. Keeping the firearm on the person at all times, even when entering a location where firearms are prohibited. Option D. Storing the firearm in an unlocked vehicle glove compartment while parked in a private driveway. The correct answer is A. Storing the firearm in a locked container within the vehicle, with ammunition stored separately. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to Louisiana's concealed handgun permit regulations, specifically concerning the proper storage of a firearm when not under the direct control of the permit holder. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance personal convenience with strict legal obligations designed to prevent accidental discharge, theft, or unauthorized access to a firearm. Failure to comply can result in legal penalties and jeopardize the individual's concealed handgun permit. The correct approach involves securing the firearm in a locked container, separate from ammunition, when it is not on the person or under the direct control of the permit holder. This method directly aligns with Louisiana Revised Statute 1495-2, which addresses the unlawful possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and by extension, the responsible storage requirements for all permit holders to prevent unauthorized access. Storing the firearm in a locked container, with ammunition stored separately, ensures that even if the container is accessed, the firearm cannot be immediately discharged. This is the most robust method for preventing unauthorized use and accidental harm, fulfilling the spirit and letter of the law designed for public safety. An incorrect approach involves leaving the firearm in an unlocked vehicle compartment, even if it is out of plain sight. This fails to meet the requirement of secure storage and significantly increases the risk of theft or unauthorized access by individuals who may not be legally permitted to possess a firearm. Such an action directly contravenes the intent of safe storage laws. Another incorrect approach is to keep the firearm on the person at all times, even when entering a location where firearms are prohibited by law, such as a courthouse or a school. While this keeps the firearm under direct control, it violates specific prohibitions on carrying firearms in certain locations, irrespective of permit status, and can lead to severe legal consequences. Finally, storing the firearm in a glove compartment without a lock, even if the vehicle is parked in a private driveway, is also an unacceptable approach. This method does not provide adequate security against unauthorized access and does not meet the standard of a locked container required by safe storage principles. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and strict adherence to all applicable statutes and regulations. This involves proactively familiarizing oneself with the specific requirements of Louisiana's concealed handgun permit laws, particularly regarding safe storage and prohibited carrying locations. When faced with a situation where a firearm must be left unattended, the professional should immediately consider the legal requirements for secure storage and choose the option that provides the highest level of security and compliance, even if it is less convenient. This proactive and compliant mindset is crucial for maintaining legal standing and ensuring public safety. Question 7. What factors determine the legality of carrying a concealed handgun into a polling place on Election Day in Louisiana for a permit holder? Option A. The specific prohibitions outlined in Louisiana Revised Statutes regarding firearms in polling places on Election Day. Option B. The assumption that concealed firearms are permissible unless explicitly prohibited by signage. Option C. The fact that the individual possesses a valid Louisiana concealed handgun permit. Option D. The personal belief that carrying a firearm enhances personal safety in any location. The correct answer is A. The specific prohibitions outlined in Louisiana revised statutes regarding firearms in polling places on Election Day. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the nuances of Louisiana's concealed handgun permit laws, specifically concerning the permissible location for carrying a concealed handgun. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying the law to a common, everyday situation, where the presence of a firearm could have significant legal and safety implications. Misinterpreting the law could lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges, as well as compromising public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the Louisiana revised statutes. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough understanding of Louisiana revised statutes Title 40, Chapter 16, specifically concerning the places where a concealed handgun may be carried. This includes recognizing that while a permit allows for concealed carry, there are explicit statutory exceptions. The correct approach is to understand that carrying a concealed handgun into a polling place on Election Day is prohibited by Louisiana law, regardless of having a valid permit. This aligns with the intent of the law to maintain the neutrality and security of the voting process. Incorrect approach is analysis. Carrying a concealed handgun into a polling place because one possesses a valid Louisiana concealed handgun permit is a regulatory failure. The permit grants the privilege to carry concealed, but it does not override specific statutory prohibitions on carrying firearms in certain locations. This approach demonstrates a misunderstanding of the limitations placed upon permit holders. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because the handgun is concealed, it is permissible to carry it into a polling place. Concealment is a condition of the permit, not a blanket authorization for all locations. The law specifically enumerates prohibited locations, and polling places on Election Day are among them. Finally, relying on personal interpretation or the absence of explicit signage prohibiting firearms at the polling place is also a failure. Louisiana law is clear on this matter, and the absence of a sign does not negate the statutory prohibition. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach situations involving firearms and legal compliance by prioritizing a direct and accurate understanding of the relevant statutes. This involves consulting the official text of the Louisiana revised statutes and seeking clarification from legal counsel or law enforcement if there is any ambiguity. A proactive approach to understanding legal restrictions, rather than assuming permissibility, is crucial for maintaining compliance and ensuring public safety. Question 8. The audit findings indicate that a Louisiana concealed handgun permit applicant recently had a contentious personal dispute with a neighbor that involved a verbal altercation but no physical violence, threats, or arrests. The applicant has no prior criminal record or history of mental health adjudications. What is the most appropriate course of action for the permit processing authority? Option A. Report the verbal altercation to local law enforcement as a potential public safety concern, regardless of whether any laws were broken. Option B. Immediately deny the permit application based on the reported personal dispute, citing potential future risks. Option C. Place the application on indefinite hold pending a subjective assessment of the applicant's temperament and the outcome of the neighbor dispute. Option D. Document the reported interaction factually. Assess if it meets any statutory disqualifiers for a concealed handgun permit under Louisiana law, and if not, proceed with the application process. Correct answer is D. Document the reported interaction factually. Assess if it meets any statutory disqualifiers for a concealed handgun permit under Louisiana law, and if not, proceed with the application process. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in judgment regarding the handling of a sensitive personal interaction that could impact an individual's eligibility for a concealed handgun permit in Louisiana. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's right to privacy and fair treatment with the strict requirements of Louisiana concealed handgun permit law, specifically concerning the disclosure of information that might affect an applicant's suitability. The auditor's concern highlights the need for a clear understanding of what constitutes a reportable event versus a minor personal matter. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective review of the applicant's situation against the specific criteria outlined in Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 40, Chapter 5, Part 1, which governs concealed handgun permits. This includes understanding the definitions of disqualifying offenses and conditions. If the interaction, as described, does not meet the statutory grounds for disqualification or mandatory reporting, e.g., it does not involve a felony, a violent crime, a domestic violence conviction, or a finding of mental incompetence, then documenting the interaction factually and proceeding with the permit application process as usual, while maintaining a record of the review, is the correct course of action. This approach upholds due process and avoids prejudging an applicant based on information that is not legally relevant to permit eligibility. Failing to proceed with the application process without a clear legal basis for denial or further investigation is an ethical and regulatory failure. This could be seen as arbitrary or discriminatory, potentially violating the applicant's rights. Similarly, immediately reporting the interaction to law enforcement or other agencies without a statutory obligation to do so constitutes an overreach and a breach of confidentiality, as it disseminates information that is not legally required to be shared and may not be relevant to public safety in the context of concealed carry. Furthermore, making a subjective judgment about the applicant's character or future behavior based on this single interaction, without a legal foundation, is unprofessional and ethically unsound. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to the letter and spirit of Louisiana concealed handgun permit laws. This involves 1. Understanding the specific statutory disqualifiers. 2. Objectively assessing the facts of any reported situation against these legal criteria. 3. Documenting the assessment process and the rationale for any decision. 4. Seeking clarification from legal counsel or supervisory authorities when the application of the law to a specific fact pattern is unclear. 5. Acting with impartiality and respect for the applicant's rights throughout the process. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that a certified Louisiana concealed handgun instructor has a close personal friend who wishes to obtain a concealed handgun permit and asks the instructor to provide the mandatory training. The instructor believes they can provide the training objectively despite the friendship. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach for the instructor to take? Option A. Inform the applicant that due to the close personal relationship, the instructor cannot personally provide the required training and recommend they seek instruction from another certified instructor. Option B. Conduct the training as usual, but advise the applicant to avoid mentioning their personal relationship to the instructor to any authorities. Option C. Proceed with the training, believing their personal relationship will not compromise their ability to provide objective instruction and evaluation. Option D. Offer a shortened or modified training session for the applicant, given their personal connection and the instructor's confidence in their ability to assess them. Correct answer is A. Inform the applicant that due to the close personal relationship, the instructor cannot personally provide the required training and recommend they seek instruction from another certified instructor. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a direct conflict between a personal relationship and the strict requirements of firearm safety and legal compliance. The applicant's close personal connection to the instructor creates a potential for bias, compromised objectivity, and a deviation from the standardized training and evaluation necessary for a concealed handgun permit in Louisiana. The applicant's desire to expedite the process, coupled with the instructor's potential willingness to overlook minor issues due to their relationship, highlights the ethical tightrope that must be navigated to uphold public safety and the integrity of the permitting process. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach is to inform the applicant that the instructor cannot personally provide the required training due to their close personal relationship. This approach upholds the principle of impartiality and ensures that the applicant receives objective instruction and evaluation from a qualified instructor who has no personal stake in the outcome. Louisiana law and the spirit of concealed carry regulations emphasize the importance of standardized, unbiased training to ensure that permit holders are competent and responsible. By referring the applicant to another certified instructor, the current instructor maintains ethical integrity and adheres to the spirit of the law, which prioritizes public safety over personal convenience or relationships. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach where the instructor proceeds with the training, assuming their close relationship will not affect their judgment, fails to recognize the inherent risk of bias. This violates the ethical obligation to provide objective instruction and assessment, potentially leading to a permit being issued to someone who may not have met the full, impartial standards. It also undermines the credibility of the training program and the permitting process. Another incorrect approach is to provide a modified or expedited training session for the applicant due to their relationship. This directly contravenes the Louisiana concealed handgun permit training requirements, which mandate specific curriculum and evaluation standards. Such a deviation compromises the integrity of the training and could result in an inadequately prepared permit holder, posing a risk to public safety. Finally, an approach where the instructor downplays the significance of the relationship and proceeds with the training while advising the applicant to simply not mention their connection to the instructor is ethically unsound and potentially illegal. This involves deception and a deliberate attempt to circumvent the spirit and letter of the law, which requires transparent and unbiased training. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must prioritize adherence to legal requirements and ethical principles above personal relationships or perceived convenience. A robust decision-making process involves 1. Identifying potential conflicts of interest arising from personal relationships. 2. Consulting relevant state regulations. Louisiana Revised Statutes, Title 40, Chapter 14, Part 1, regarding concealed handgun permit training and instructor qualifications. 3. Evaluating the impact of the relationship on the objectivity and integrity of the training and evaluation process. 4. Choosing the course of action that best upholds public safety and the legal framework, even if it means declining to provide services directly. Question 10. Strategic planning requires a responsible concealed handgun permit holder in Louisiana to anticipate future financial obligations. If a permit is valid for 10 years and the current renewal fee is $50, but you estimate a conservative average annual increase of 2% in renewal fees over that period, what is the approximate total amount you should aim to have saved to cover the renewal fee and potential administrative costs over the full 10 years, assuming administrative costs are negligible and the fee is paid at the end of each 10-year cycle? Option A, approximately $550. Option B, the current fee of $50 is sufficient for the entire period. Option C, approximately $610. Option D, exactly $500. The correct answer is C, approximately $610. Explanation. Strategic planning requires careful consideration of financial implications, especially when dealing with potential liabilities. In Louisiana, understanding the financial responsibilities associated with concealed handgun permits, including renewal fees and potential legal costs, is crucial for responsible permit holders. This scenario presents a challenge because it forces an individual to balance personal financial planning with legal obligations and the potential for unforeseen expenses. The core of the challenge lies in accurately estimating future costs and making informed decisions based on those estimates, while also acknowledging the inherent uncertainties. The best approach involves a proactive and conservative financial strategy. This means setting aside funds that not only cover the known renewal fees, but also include a buffer for potential increases or unexpected administrative costs. For example, if the current renewal fee is $50 and the permit is valid for 10 years, a simple calculation of /50 times 10 equals 500 might seem sufficient. However, a more prudent strategy would involve projecting potential fee increases over that decade. If one anticipates an average annual increase of 2%, the future value of the renewal fee can be estimated using the compound interest formula. FV equals PV times 1 plus RN where PV is the present value or current fee, R is the annual increase rate, and N is the number of years. For $50 fee with a 2% annual increase over 10 years, the estimated future cost would be /50 times 1 plus 0, 0.2, 10 approx 60, 95 /. Therefore, setting aside an amount slightly higher than the simple sum, perhaps $600 to $700, to cover the renewal and potential administrative fees over the permit's lifespan, demonstrates responsible financial planning and adherence to the spirit of maintaining a valid permit. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation of a permit holder to remain compliant with Louisiana law and avoid lapses in their permit status due to financial oversight. An approach that only allocates the exact current renewal fee for the entire permit duration fails to account for the time value of money and potential fee adjustments mandated by Louisiana law. This could lead to a shortfall when the renewal period arrives, potentially causing the permit to lapse and resulting in legal complications. Another less advisable approach is to defer all financial planning for the permit renewal until closer to the expiration date. This creates a risk of financial strain if unexpected expenses arise, or if the renewal fee has increased significantly. It also demonstrates a lack of foresight and proactive responsibility, which are key ethical considerations for any licensed individual. Finally, an approach that assumes the renewal fee will remain static indefinitely is unrealistic and ignores the possibility of legislative changes or administrative adjustments to the fee structure in Louisiana. This lack of adaptability can lead to non-compliance and potential penalties. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes foresight and risk mitigation. This involves understanding all associated costs, researching potential future changes in fees or regulations, and building a financial buffer to accommodate these uncertainties. For concealed handgun permit holders in Louisiana, this means not just knowing the current fee, but also planning for its renewal over the permit's validity period, considering potential increases, and ensuring funds are readily available to maintain compliance. Question 11. The audit findings indicate that during a concealed handgun permit training session in Louisiana, an instructor observed an applicant discreetly adjusting a medical device that appeared to be a prosthetic limb. The instructor is unsure if this observation has any bearing on the applicant's eligibility for a concealed handgun permit under Louisiana law. What is the most appropriate course of action for the instructor in this situation? Option A. Publicly question the applicant about the observed item and their medical condition to assess their suitability for a permit. Option B. Immediately terminate the training session and refuse to issue a certificate of completion, citing potential eligibility concerns. Option C. Discreetly and privately inquire with the applicant if they have any questions or concerns regarding the training or the permit process, without directly referencing the observed item. Option D. Ignore the observation and proceed with the training, as if nothing unusual occurred. The correct answer is C. Discreetly and privately inquire with the applicant if they have any questions or concerns regarding the training or the permit process, without directly referencing the observed item. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's right to privacy and the instructor's duty to ensure public safety and adherence to Louisiana concealed handgun permit regulations. The instructor must act ethically and legally, avoiding both overreach and negligence. The best approach involves discreetly informing the applicant of the policy and offering assistance within the bounds of the law. This upholds the instructor's responsibility to ensure all permit holders meet the required standards without creating an unnecessary public spectacle or violating the applicant's privacy. Louisiana law, while not explicitly detailing instructor conduct in such specific personal situations, implies a duty to ensure the integrity of the permitting process. Ethically, maintaining professionalism and respecting individual dignity are paramount. This approach prioritizes a solution that is both compliant and respectful. An incorrect approach would be to immediately refuse to continue the training or to publicly question the applicant's suitability based on the observed personal item. This could be discriminatory, violate the applicant's privacy, and potentially lead to legal repercussions if the item is not indicative of a prohibited status under Louisiana law. It bypasses the opportunity to address the situation privately and constructively. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the observation entirely. While seemingly avoiding conflict, this could be a dereliction of duty if the observed item were, in fact, indicative of a disqualifying condition. The instructor has a responsibility to ensure the applicant is legally eligible for a concealed handgun permit, and a deliberate oversight could have serious consequences for public safety and the integrity of the permit system. A further incorrect approach would be to report the observation to law enforcement without first attempting to understand the situation or speaking with the applicant. This is an overreaction that escalates a potentially minor issue into a formal investigation, infringing on the applicant's rights and potentially damaging their reputation without due cause. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes gathering information, assessing risk, and acting within legal and ethical boundaries. This involves a private, respectful inquiry first, followed by appropriate action based on the gathered information and relevant regulations. Question 12. The audit findings indicate that a Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder, who is also a respected member of their community, learned that close friend is applying for a concealed handgun permit. The permit holder knows the friend has a history of minor legal issues that might complicate their application, and the friend has asked the permit holder for advice on how to expedite the process or ensure approval. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach for the permit holder to take? Option A. Suggest the friend focus on gathering character references from mutual acquaintances who can vouch for their good nature, even if those references are not directly related to the friend's legal history. Option B. Offer to contact a contact within the permitting office to put in a good word for the friend, explaining that personal connections can sometimes help navigate bureaucratic processes. Option C. Provide the friend with a copy of their own completed application and suggest they use it as a guide, emphasizing that similar information should suffice. Option D. Advise the friend to follow the standard application procedure meticulously and assure them that the authorities will review all applications based on the established legal criteria, without offering any personal intervention or shortcuts. Correct answer is D. Advise the friend to follow the standard application procedure meticulously and assure them that the authorities will review all applications based on the established legal criteria, without offering any personal intervention or shortcuts. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in judgment regarding the handling of a sensitive personal interaction that could impact the integrity of the concealed handgun permit process in Louisiana. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing personal relationships with strict adherence to legal and ethical standards governing firearm permits. The permit holder's desire to assist a friend, coupled with the friend's potential eligibility issues, creates a conflict of interest and a risk of compromising the objective evaluation required by law. The best professional approach involves maintaining strict impartiality and adhering to the established legal procedures for permit applications. This means advising the friend to follow the standard application process without any special intervention or influence. Louisiana law, specifically the provisions governing concealed handgun permits, emphasizes objective criteria for eligibility and prohibits undue influence or favoritism. By directing the friend to the official application channels and refraining from any actions that could be construed as preferential treatment or an attempt to circumvent regulations, the permit holder upholds the integrity of the system and avoids any appearance of impropriety. This approach ensures compliance with the spirit and letter of Louisiana's concealed handgun laws, which are designed to ensure public safety and responsible firearm ownership. An incorrect approach would be to offer to put in a good word or to suggest ways the friend might bypass certain requirements. This action directly violates the principle of equal and objective application of the law. It introduces personal bias into a process that must be strictly merit-based and could lead to an unqualified individual obtaining a permit, thereby undermining public safety and violating Louisiana statutes that mandate specific eligibility criteria. Another incorrect approach would be to provide the friend with a copy of the permit holder's own application materials and suggest they use them as a template. While seemingly helpful, this could lead to the friend misrepresenting information or failing to meet specific requirements that are unique to their own circumstances. It also skirts the requirement for the applicant to personally attest to the accuracy and completeness of their own application, as mandated by Louisiana law. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and hope it resolves itself, while not actively facilitating a violation. This passive stance fails to uphold the professional responsibility to act ethically and to ensure the integrity of the permitting process. It misses an opportunity to guide the friend toward the correct legal path and could be seen as tacitly condoning a potential circumvention of the rules. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves first identifying any potential conflicts of interest or situations that could compromise objectivity. Next, they should consult the relevant statutes and regulations, in this case, Louisiana's concealed handgun permit laws, to understand their obligations. Finally, they should choose the course of action that most clearly aligns with legal requirements and ethical principles, even if it means disappointing a friend or declining to offer assistance that falls outside of established procedures. Question 13. The efficiency study reveals that a close friend, who is also a permit holder, is planning to attend a private event at a local restaurant in Louisiana. The restaurant management has clearly posted signage indicating that firearms are prohibited on their premises, a policy that is legally enforceable by the property owner. Your friend, aware of your permit, asks if you believe it would be acceptable for them to carry their concealed handgun to the event, citing their permit as justification. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action? Option A. Advise your friend that their concealed handgun permit likely supersedes the restaurant's posted policy, as it signifies they have met the state's requirements for responsible firearm ownership. Option B. Suggest to your friend that they might be able to conceal their handgun effectively enough that it would not be noticed, and therefore, the risk of being caught violating the policy is minimal. Option C. Politely inform your friend that while they possess a valid Louisiana concealed handgun permit, the restaurant's posted policy prohibits firearms on their private property, and therefore, they should not carry their handgun to the event. Option D. Offer to speak with the restaurant management on your friend's behalf, explaining your own status as a permit holder to see if an exception can be made for your friend. The correct answer is C. Politely inform your friend that while they possess a valid Louisiana concealed handgun permit, the restaurant's posted policy prohibits firearms on their private property, and therefore, they should not carry their handgun to the event. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict of interest that requires careful ethical consideration and adherence to Louisiana's concealed handgun permit laws and ethical guidelines for permit holders. The scenario is professionally challenging because it pits a personal relationship against a professional obligation to uphold the law and maintain public trust. The permit holder must navigate the potential for perceived favoritism or undue influence, ensuring that their actions are transparent and legally sound, even when dealing with a close acquaintance. The best professional approach involves prioritizing legal compliance and ethical conduct above personal convenience or perceived obligation to a friend. This means directly and politely informing the acquaintance that, while the permit allows for concealed carry, the specific establishment's policy, as communicated by management, prohibits firearms on the premises. This approach upholds the law by respecting the establishment's rules, which are legally permissible for private property owners to enforce. It also demonstrates integrity by not attempting to circumvent established policies and maintains professional boundaries by addressing the situation directly and factually, without engaging in personal justifications or arguments. This aligns with the ethical responsibility of a permit holder to be a responsible and law-abiding citizen, setting a positive example. An incorrect approach would be to overlook the establishment's policy due to the acquaintance's status or the permit holder's own permit. This fails to acknowledge that while the permit grants the right to carry concealed, it does not override private property rights or specific establishment rules. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest to the acquaintance that they might be able to get away with it, or to imply that the permit holder's status somehow exempts them from the establishment's rules. This is ethically unsound as it encourages disregard for rules and potentially violates the spirit, if not the letter, of responsible firearm ownership and adherence to property regulations. Furthermore, attempting to use the permit holder's status to influence the acquaintance or the establishment would be a misuse of the permit and a breach of professional ethics. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding and prioritizing all applicable laws and regulations, including those governing concealed carry in Louisiana and the rights of private property owners. This should be followed by an assessment of the specific circumstances, including any stated policies of the establishment. Ethical considerations, such as avoiding conflicts of interest and maintaining public trust, should then guide the decision. Finally, the chosen course of action must be communicated clearly, respectfully, and factually, ensuring transparency and adherence to both legal and ethical standards. Question 14. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the background check documentation for a concealed handgun permit application in Louisiana, specifically regarding a potentially incomplete criminal history report. As an employee of the sheriff's office responsible for initial application review, what is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action? Option A. Immediately and discreetly report the observed discrepancy to the designated supervisory authority within the Louisiana Sheriff's Office for further investigation and action. Option B. Directly question the applicant about the incomplete background check documentation without consulting any supervisors or following established protocols. Option C. Overlook the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor administrative error that does not significantly impact the applicant's eligibility for a concealed handgun permit. Option D. Discuss the observed discrepancy with fellow colleagues who are not directly involved in the application review process to seek their informal opinion. The correct answer is A. Immediately and discreetly report the observed discrepancy to the designated supervisory authority within the Louisiana Sheriff's Office for further investigation and action. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential ethical lapse in handling sensitive information related to a concealed handgun permit application. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's privacy with the legal obligations of the permit holder and the potential for misuse of information. The auditor's discovery necessitates a careful and ethical response that upholds the integrity of the process. The best professional approach involves immediately and discreetly reporting the observed discrepancy to the appropriate supervisory authority within the Louisiana Sheriff's Office. This approach is correct because it adheres to established protocols for handling potential violations of law and policy. Louisiana law, specifically concerning concealed handgun permits and the duties of law enforcement, emphasizes the importance of maintaining accurate records and reporting any suspected irregularities. By reporting the issue through official channels, the individual acts with integrity, ensures proper investigation, and avoids personal involvement in potentially compromising the application process or violating privacy laws. This upholds the ethical duty to report misconduct and ensures that the matter is handled by those with the authority to investigate and take appropriate action. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy, assuming it was a minor oversight or not within one's direct responsibility. This fails to uphold the duty to report potential violations of law or policy, which is a fundamental ethical obligation for anyone involved in law enforcement or administrative processes. It would also lead to the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual, posing a public safety risk. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the applicant directly about the discrepancy without proper authorization or protocol. This could violate the applicant's privacy rights, potentially interfere with an official investigation, and place the individual in a position of unauthorized authority. It bypasses the established procedures for addressing such issues and could lead to accusations of harassment or improper conduct. A further incorrect approach would be to discuss the discrepancy with colleagues who are not directly involved in the application review or supervisory oversight. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could lead to the spread of unsubstantiated information, damaging the reputation of the applicant and the integrity of the sheriff's office. It violates ethical principles of discretion and professional conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and legal requirements. When faced with a potential ethical dilemma or a discrepancy in official processes, the first step should be to identify the relevant laws, regulations, and internal policies. The next step is to assess the potential impact of the discrepancy on public safety, individual rights, and the integrity of the institution. Finally, the professional should choose the course of action that is most transparent, accountable, and aligned with legal and ethical standards, typically involving reporting to the appropriate authority. Question 15. The audit findings indicate that a Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder recently moved and failed to update their address with the issuing authority within the legally prescribed timeframe. The permit holder believes this oversight is minor and does not affect their eligibility to carry a concealed handgun. What is the most appropriate course of action for the permit holder to take regarding this situation? Option A. Assume the address change is insignificant and does not require reporting, as it does not impact their eligibility to carry. Option B. Immediately submit a formal written notification of the address change to the Louisiana State Police, along with any required supporting documentation. Option C. Wait until contacted by law enforcement or the issuing authority to provide the updated address information. Option D. Inform a local sheriff's deputy verbally about the address change during a routine interaction. The correct answer is B. Immediately submit a formal written notification of the address change to the Louisiana State Police, along with any required supporting documentation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's right to privacy and the lawful exercise of firearm rights with the responsibility to uphold public safety and adhere to the strict requirements of Louisiana concealed handgun permit law. The permit holder's disclosure of information, even if seemingly minor, could have significant implications for the integrity of the permitting process and the safety of the public. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all applicable statutes and ethical obligations. The best professional approach involves immediately and accurately reporting the incident to the appropriate authorities as mandated by Louisiana law. This approach is correct because Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 40, Chapter 16, specifically concerning concealed handgun permits, emphasizes the importance of maintaining accurate records and reporting any changes in an applicant's or permit holder's status that could affect their eligibility. Failing to report a change in address, even if it seems insignificant, violates the spirit and letter of the law, which requires permit holders to keep their information current. Prompt and accurate reporting ensures that law enforcement and licensing bodies have the most up-to-date information, which is crucial for public safety and the proper administration of the concealed handgun permit system. This upholds the ethical duty to be truthful and transparent with regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach would be to disregard the address change, assuming it is not significant enough to warrant reporting. This is ethically and regulatorily unsound, because it bypasses a legal requirement for permit holders to maintain accurate contact information. Such an oversight could lead to critical notifications from the licensing authority being undeliverable, potentially resulting in the permit holder unknowingly being in violation of permit conditions or facing revocation without their knowledge. Another incorrect approach would be to only report the address change if directly asked by law enforcement during a traffic stop. This is a reactive and insufficient measure. Louisiana law requires proactive reporting of changes that affect permit holder information. Waiting to be prompted by law enforcement is a failure to meet the ongoing obligation to keep information current and could be interpreted as an attempt to conceal information. A third incorrect approach would be to inform the local sheriff's office verbally without any written documentation. While the sheriff's office is involved in the permitting process, official channels for reporting changes typically require written or electronic submission to the Louisiana State Police, the agency responsible for maintaining the statewide registry. Relying solely on a verbal report to a local office may not result in the information being properly updated in the central database, thus failing to meet the legal requirement for accurate record keeping. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to legal mandates and ethical responsibilities. This involves understanding the specific reporting requirements outlined in Louisiana's concealed handgun permit statutes, maintaining a proactive approach to compliance, and ensuring all communications with regulatory bodies are documented and submitted through the designated official channels. When in doubt about reporting obligations, consulting the relevant statutes or seeking guidance from the Louisiana State Police is the most prudent course of action. Question 16. The audit findings indicate a minor discrepancy in the address provided on a Louisiana concealed handgun permit application compared to the applicant's current residency verification. What is the most appropriate next step for the permit issuing authority? Option A. Contact the applicant to request clarification and updated documentation for the address discrepancy. Option B. Immediately deny the permit application due to the address inconsistency. Option C. Proceed with issuing the permit, assuming the discrepancy is insignificant and does not affect eligibility. Option D. Share the address discrepancy with local law enforcement for an independent verification before contacting the applicant. Correct answer is A. Contact the applicant to request clarification and updated documentation for the address discrepancy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's right to privacy and due process with the responsibility of ensuring public safety and adherence to Louisiana's concealed handgun permit laws. The permit holder's disclosure of personal information, even if seemingly minor, have implications for their safety and the integrity of the permit system. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action that upholds both legal obligations and ethical standards. The best professional approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the applicant regarding the audit finding. This approach acknowledges the applicant's right to be informed about potential issues with their permit application or status. It allows for clarification and correction of any inaccuracies or omissions in the submitted documentation. Louisiana law, while not explicitly detailing audit procedures for concealed handgun permits, operates under principles of administrative fairness and due process, which necessitate informing individuals of findings that could affect their rights or privileges. Ethically, this approach demonstrates integrity and respect for the applicant. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy and proceed with issuing the permit without further inquiry. This fails to uphold the diligence required in processing permit applications and could potentially lead to the issuance of a permit to an individual who may not fully meet all statutory requirements, thereby compromising public safety and the integrity of the permit system. It also bypasses the opportunity to ensure the accuracy of the applicant's information, which is a fundamental aspect of responsible administrative practice. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately deny the permit based solely on the discrepancy, without giving the applicant an opportunity to explain or rectify the situation. This would be a violation of due process principles, as individuals are generally entitled to notice and an opportunity to be heard before an adverse administrative action is taken. Louisiana's administrative law framework emphasizes fairness and the right to respond to allegations or findings. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to share the applicant's personal information with unauthorized individuals or agencies. This would be a clear violation of privacy laws and ethical standards governing the handling of sensitive personal data. The audit findings are confidential and should only be discussed with relevant parties involved in the permit review process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, fairness, and legal compliance. This involves a systematic review of all submitted documentation, identification of any discrepancies, and a clear, documented process for addressing these issues with the applicant. Transparency, adherence to due process, and the protection of personal information are paramount in such situations. Question 17. Market research demonstrates that individuals seeking to obtain or renew a concealed handgun permit in Louisiana may sometimes encounter situations where a friend or acquaintance asks for assistance that could be perceived as influencing the application process. If a Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder is asked by a close friend to provide a letter of recommendation or vouch for their character in a way that they know is not entirely accurate due to the friend's recent legal troubles, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action? Option A. Provide the letter of recommendation or vouch for the friend's character as requested, assuming that a personal relationship overrides the need for strict adherence to application requirements. Option B. Politely decline the request, explaining that providing such a letter or vouching for character in a way that is not fully truthful would violate Louisiana concealed handgun permit laws and could have serious consequences for both parties. Option C. Inform the friend that you cannot help them with the letter or vouching for their character, but suggest they ask another acquaintance who might be less concerned with the strict legal requirements. Option D. Agree to provide the letter or vouch for the friend's character, but advise them to be completely honest about their recent legal troubles when filling out the application. The correct answer is B. Politely decline the request, explaining that providing such a letter or vouching for character in a way that is not fully truthful would violate Louisiana concealed handgun permit laws and could have serious consequences for both parties. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing personal relationships with the strict legal and ethical obligations of a concealed handgun permit holder in Louisiana. The core conflict lies in the potential for a personal favor to inadvertently compromise the applicant's legal standing and the permit holder's responsibility. The permit holder must navigate this situation without violating Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 40, Chapter 17, Part X, which governs concealed handgun permits, and without engaging in unethical conduct that could jeopardize their own permit or the applicant's future eligibility. The correct approach involves politely but firmly declining the request, explaining that assisting in such a manner would be a violation of Louisiana law and could have serious repercussions for both individuals. This upholds the permit holder's legal duty to ensure all permit applications are handled strictly according to statutory requirements and demonstrates ethical integrity by refusing to engage in any action that could be construed as facilitating a false statement or misrepresentation on an official application. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct above personal convenience or obligation. An incorrect approach would be to agree to provide the requested information, even with the intention of being helpful. This directly violates Louisiana law by potentially misrepresenting the applicant's residency or other critical information required for the permit application. It also constitutes unethical behavior by exploiting a position of trust and knowledge to circumvent legal processes. Another incorrect approach would be to provide the information, but advise the applicant to be truthful about the situation. While seemingly a compromise, this still involves the permit holder in a potentially illegal act of facilitating a misrepresentation, even if the applicant ultimately corrects it. The permit holder's role is not to advise on how to navigate potential misrepresentations, but to ensure the application process is followed correctly from the outset. A further incorrect approach would be to ignore the request and hope the applicant finds another way. This fails to address the ethical dilemma and leaves the applicant in a position where they might still attempt to misrepresent information, potentially involving the permit holder indirectly. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core legal and ethical obligations. They should then assess the request against these obligations, considering potential consequences for themselves and others. When a request conflicts with legal or ethical duties, the professional response should be to clearly and respectfully decline, explaining the reasons based on legal and ethical principles, and offering no alternative that involves circumventing established procedures. Question 18. The evaluation methodology shows that a Louisiana resident who holds a valid concealed handgun permit is visiting a family member who expresses concern about their personal safety and asks if they can temporarily store their handgun in the permit holder's locked vehicle while they attend a social gathering where firearms are prohibited. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the permit holder to take? Option A. Advise the family member to leave the handgun at home, even if it means they feel less safe, as the permit holder should not involve themselves in potentially compromising situations. Option B. Politely but firmly decline the request, explaining that Louisiana law requires firearms to be secured in a locked container separate from ammunition, and that the permit holder cannot assume responsibility for a firearm in a manner that might violate these regulations. Even for temporary storage, Option C. Agree to store the handgun in the locked vehicle, ensuring it is unloaded and the ammunition is stored separately, as a gesture of goodwill and to help the family member avoid legal trouble. Option D. Offer to carry the handgun for the family member to their destination and hold onto it until they are ready to leave, as this would keep the firearm with a permit holder. The correct answer is B. Politely but firmly decline the request, explaining that Louisiana law requires firearms to be secured in a locked container separate from ammunition, and that the permit holder cannot assume responsibility for a firearm in a manner that might violate these regulations, even for temporary storage. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent conflict between personal relationships and the strict requirements of firearm safety and legal compliance. A concealed handgun permit holder in Louisiana has a responsibility to uphold the law and ensure the safety of themselves and others. This responsibility is amplified when a close personal relationship is involved, as emotions and personal loyalties can cloud judgment and potentially lead to actions that violate legal statutes or ethical principles. Careful judgment is required to navigate these situations without compromising the integrity of the permit or the safety of the public. The best professional approach involves prioritizing legal compliance and safety above personal convenience or perceived obligation. This means strictly adhering to Louisiana revised statutes, particularly those governing the carrying of concealed handguns and the responsibilities of permit holders. Specifically, it requires understanding and applying the provisions related to where a concealed handgun may be carried and the conditions under which it must be secured. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal framework designed to prevent accidental discharge, unauthorized access, and the misuse of firearms. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible gun ownership and public safety, which are the foundational principles of the concealed handgun permit system in Louisiana. An incorrect approach would be to allow a family member to temporarily store a handgun in a personal vehicle, without ensuring it is unloaded and secured in a locked container, separate from ammunition. This fails to meet the legal requirements for secure storage and transportation of firearms, even if the intent is to prevent the family member from carrying it illegally. The permit holder remains responsible for the firearm's condition and location. Another incorrect approach is to assume that because the family member is trusted, the standard safety protocols can be bypassed. Trust does not negate legal obligations or the inherent risks associated with unsecured firearms. Furthermore, offering to carry the firearm for the family member, even with good intentions, could be construed as aiding or abetting an illegal act if the family member is not legally permitted to carry a concealed handgun themselves, or if the circumstances of the carry are not compliant with Louisiana law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable Louisiana laws and regulations concerning concealed carry and firearm storage. When faced with a situation involving a firearm and a personal relationship, the professional should first assess the legality of any proposed action. If there is any doubt, seeking clarification from law enforcement or legal counsel is advisable. The paramount consideration must always be public safety and adherence to the law, even if it means disappointing or inconveniencing a friend or family member. The decision-making process should prioritize responsible firearm stewardship and legal compliance over personal comfort or social pressure. Question 19. The audit findings indicate that a permit holder for a concealed handgun in Louisiana has recently entered into a personal relationship with an individual who has a documented history of domestic violence, a factor that could potentially impact the permit holder's continued eligibility. As an auditor observing this situation, what is the most appropriate and ethically sound course of action to take? Option A. Directly advise the permit holder that their relationship may jeopardize their permit and suggest they voluntarily surrender it. Option B. Ignore the situation, assuming the permit holder is still legally eligible and that personal relationships do not affect permit status. Option C. Discuss the observed circumstances with the permit holder's friends and family to gather more information before deciding on any action. Option D. Discreetly report the observed circumstances to the Louisiana State Police, the agency responsible for concealed handgun permits, for their investigation and determination of eligibility. Correct answer is D. Discreetly report the observed circumstances to the Louisiana State Police, the agency responsible for concealed handgun permits, for their investigation and determination of eligibility. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in judgment regarding the handling of a sensitive personal interaction that could impact an individual's right to self-defense. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing personal relationships with strict adherence to legal requirements and ethical obligations concerning firearm permits. The auditor's concern stems from a situation where a permit holder's eligibility might be compromised due to a personal relationship, and the permit holder's actions, or lack thereof, could have legal ramifications. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all permit holders continue to meet the statutory requirements for carrying a concealed handgun in Louisiana, and that any potential issues are addressed promptly and appropriately without violating privacy or due process. The best professional approach involves immediately and discreetly reporting the observed circumstances to the appropriate Louisiana State Police authority responsible for concealed handgun permits. This action is correct because Louisiana law, specifically the provisions governing concealed handgun permits, mandates that permit holders must remain eligible to possess a handgun. While the law doesn't explicitly detail reporting obligations for observed potential ineligibility by a third party, the ethical imperative and the spirit of public safety inherent in firearm regulation necessitate bringing such concerns to the attention of the licensing authority. This allows the authorities to conduct a proper investigation and make a determination based on established legal criteria, thereby upholding the integrity of the permitting system and public safety. Failing to report the observed circumstances to the Louisiana State Police is professionally unacceptable. This approach neglects the fundamental responsibility to ensure that individuals carrying concealed handguns meet the ongoing eligibility requirements set forth by Louisiana law. It allows a potentially ineligible individual to continue carrying a firearm, which undermines public safety and the purpose of the concealed handgun permit system. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to directly confront the permit holder and demand they relinquish their permit or cease carrying. This is incorrect because it bypasses the established legal process for determining permit eligibility and revocation. Such direct intervention by an auditor or observer, without proper authority, could lead to legal complications, personal endangerment, and an improper determination of eligibility, which is solely the purview of the Louisiana State Police. Finally, ignoring the situation and assuming the permit holder is still eligible is also professionally unacceptable. This approach demonstrates a disregard for the potential risks associated with a permit holder no longer meeting the legal criteria for carrying a concealed handgun. It prioritizes convenience or avoidance of conflict over the critical responsibility of maintaining public safety and the integrity of the firearm licensing process in Louisiana. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety. This involves recognizing potential red flags, understanding the relevant legal framework, Louisiana concealed handgun permit laws, and knowing the proper channels for reporting concerns to the designated authorities. The process should be discreet, objective, and focused on facilitating an official review rather than making personal judgments or taking unauthorized actions. Question 20. Regulatory review indicates that a fellow Louisiana concealed handgun permit holder who is temporarily unable to store their handgun securely due to a home repair emergency asks you to hold it for them for approximately 2 weeks until their home is safe again. They offer to pay you a small fee for your trouble. If the handgun is unloaded and you store it in your locked gun safe, what is the most legally and ethically sound course of action according to Louisiana law? Option A. Suggest they leave the handgun with you, but do not formally transfer ownership, and you will keep it in your safe until they can retrieve it. Option B. Inform them that since they are a concealed handgun permit holder, you can temporarily hold it for them as a courtesy between permit holders. Option C. Advise the individual that you cannot legally store their firearm for them, and suggest they explore legal options for temporary secure storage with a licensed dealer or a family member who can legally possess it. Option D. Agree to store the unloaded handgun in your locked gun safe for the agreed-upon fee, as it is unloaded and you are both concealed handgun permit holders. The correct answer is C. Advise the individual that you cannot legally store their firearm for them, and suggest they explore legal options for temporary secure storage with a licensed dealer or a family member who can legally possess it. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a desire to assist a fellow permit holder and the strict legal requirements governing the transfer and storage of firearms. The professional is entrusted with upholding the law, and any deviation, even with good intentions, can have serious legal ramifications for both themselves and the individual seeking assistance. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and legally. The best approach involves adhering strictly to Louisiana law regarding firearm transfers. This means recognizing that a verbal agreement or informal handover of a firearm does not constitute a legal transfer. The correct professional action is to advise the individual seeking assistance that they must follow the legal procedures for acquiring a firearm, which may involve a background check and proper registration, depending on the specific circumstances and type of firearm, as outlined by Louisiana revised statutes. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and ensures that all parties act within the bounds of the law, preventing potential illegal possession charges and ensuring the firearm is transferred through legitimate channels. An incorrect approach would be to agree to hold the firearm for the individual until they can legally possess it. This creates a situation of illegal constructive possession, as the professional would be storing a firearm for someone who is not legally authorized to possess it at that moment. This violates the spirit and letter of Louisiana firearm laws designed to prevent unauthorized access to weapons. Another incorrect approach would be to suggest the individual borrow the firearm temporarily without a formal transfer. This circumvents the legal requirements for firearm acquisition and could lead to the individual being in illegal possession of a firearm, even if the intent is temporary. It also exposes the professional to liability if the firearm is used in a crime during this period. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to simply refuse to help without offering any guidance on legal procedures. While not directly illegal, This fails to uphold a professional standard of assisting others within legal boundaries and misses an opportunity to educate the individual on proper firearm acquisition. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Identifying the core legal requirements related to firearm possession and transfer in Louisiana. 2. Evaluating the proposed action against these legal requirements. 3. Prioritizing legal compliance and ethical conduct over personal convenience or informal arrangements. 4. If unsure, consulting official resources or legal counsel.